It's going to be a drag race all the way back to the start-finish line. No caution. They're side by side, right to the line.
Big crash. Here they come. Checkered flag.
It's February 18th, 2007 at the Daytona 500, and this looks like something out of a movie. Two guys racing to the checkered flag as the entire field behind them wrecks away into nothingness. This is such a perfect drama-filled moment that if you actually did put this in a movie, it would immediately break my willing suspension of disbelief. It's just too unbelievable. But, as they say, if you want strange, go read fiction. But if you want the truly bizarre, go read a history book. So let's rewind. How did it come to this? Who are these two guys? Why did this happen? And how come no one expected these two guys to be anywhere near this position at the end of the race? Well, let's start with the man to the inside here, Mark Martin in the U.S. Army sponsored number 01. It's a new seat for him, and as a matter of fact, this is his very first race with that team. After a long and storied career at Roush Racing spanning from 1988 to 2006 that included 35 wins, Mark was almost ready to call it a career. He had actually announced his retirement in 2005, stating that he'd be done at the end of the season. But Jack Roush needed some extra time to find a replacement driver, so Mark signed a one-year extension. But the racing bug wasn't fully out of his system yet, and he sought to do what many other greats before him had done before bowing out, running a part-time schedule. It's not unheard of. David Pearson and Cale Yarborough had some of the best years of their careers running part-time schedules in their twilight years. However, Roush Racing is only interested in full-time competition, so Mark looked elsewhere and ended up with MB2 Motorsports. They had won only twice in the past, with Johnny Benson, Mark's former teammate, back in 2002, and with Joe Nemechek driving this very car in 2004. It's not exactly an ideal gig, but Mark obviously sees something in the team that nobody else does. I mean, he's here leading the race just a few hundred yards from victory, so obviously he was right. During the off-season, MB2 is bought out by the business mogul Bobby Ginn, who is essentially looking to buy his way into a winning NASCAR organization. He pours money into the team, and the crew at the new Ginn Motorsports put it to good use. The man to his outside, though, has probably one of the most harrowing journeys to NASCAR's top division that anybody could ever lay claim to. His number 29 Richard Childress Racing Chevy was originally the number 3 driven by Dale Earnhardt Sr., but 6 years ago to the day, Dale lost his life in this very race in the final corner of the final lap. Harvick had come up from the Winston West regional circuit, where he won the championship in 1998, and that was enough to catch the eye of Richard Childress, who gave him a full-time Busch Series ride in 2000. In 2001, his plan is to compete in the Busch Series full-time again and make a run at the title. But with Earnhardt's death, RCR pressed him into service in the rebranded number 29 GM Goodwrench car. His very first Cup start is just 1 week after Dale Earnhardt's death at Rockingham, where he finishes a respectable 14th. Harvick's new Cup team is the exact same crew that backed Dale Sr. in Daytona, only the paint scheme and the number are different. This young guy from Bakersfield, California has some massive shoes to fill, and there's an honest question as to whether or not he's ready for something like this, in this high-pressure scenario. But in the 4th race of the year at Atlanta Motor Speedway, Kevin Harvick won the race in just his 3rd start ever. And he didn't just win, he won in dramatic fashion, going wire to wire with Jeff Gordon to the line, in almost identical manner to how Dale Sr. won the exact same race just 1 year ago. For even the most grief-stricken Earnhardt fan, this was enough to help heal the wounds at the end of the Daytona 500 that year. Happy Harvick from California was here to stay. Fast forward to 2007, and he has 10 wins under his belt and is now poised to win the race that took Dale Sr. 20 years of frustration to accomplish. However, nobody at the Speedway today picked these two guys to be in this position with 1 to go. All throughout Speedweeks, they were pretty much a non-factor. The two men everybody had their eye on going into today were Kurt Busch and Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart had won the shootout last week and his qualifying race on Thursday. He had shown speed in every race he had run up to this point. The 1997 IndyCar champ and the 2002 and 2005 Cup Series champ had proven himself in just about every single discipline of racing he had ever entered. But the crown jewel events had always eluded him. He never won the Indy 500, despite looking like he had it on lockdown a couple of times, and his chances at the Daytona 500 had never materialized. But if 1 year ever looked like his year, this was it. Kurt Busch was beginning his 2nd year with Penske, and the venture was off to a rocky start. He had just 1 win the year prior, but nothing else to really show for the chance Roger Penske had taken on him. Kurt was a known hothead, and an incident with a police officer during a traffic stop in Arizona in 2005 had essentially ended his stint at Roush Racing. Penske had never won the Daytona 500 up to that point, and neither had Kurt. He had some good runs, but this year he's looking especially sporty. He finished 3rd in the shootout and 2nd in its qualifier. That's pretty good, but when the green flag dropped for the start of the main event, Kurt goes on the offensive and takes the lead at lap 19. He'll go on to lead 95 laps, nearly half of the race, the most of any driver today, and Tony Stewart will lead 35, the second most. So why aren't the two best cars at the track today up here battling for the win, or anywhere near the front for that matter? Well, the race had been pretty uneventful for its first 3 quarters. Only 2 yellows for one-off accidents by Borisset and Kyle Petty. But on lap 154, while leading the race, Tony Stewart wiggles just a bit in turn 3 as the car steps out from underneath him. So he lets off the throttle momentarily, but it's enough to have Kurt, who was running second, just ever so delicately tap him and send Tony around. The 20 car collects the 2, and now all of a sudden the 2 favorites are out for good. Tony and Kurt will finish 43rd and 41st respectively. Now inside the final 50 laps, drivers can feel the pressure mounting to get towards the front in the last quarter of the race, and it is marred by one big accident after another. The Great American Race has now become a war of attrition and a fight for survival. After a massive accident in turn 2, a new unlikely leader emerges after the pit stops, Mark Martin. Mark Martin was never renowned as a super speedway ace. His only Daytona victory came in the 1999 Bud Shootout, and his only points-paying restrictor plate win came in 1997 at Talladega, where he ran the fastest race in NASCAR history, 500 miles in just a smidge over 2.5 hours. He's on the record having stated that he doesn't like the style of racing, and now that he can pick and choose where he competes, it's odd to see him out here of all places. But the allure of the biggest crown jewel race in all of NASCAR is just too enticing, and he makes plans to run just this one superspeedway for 2007. Mark survives the ensuing carnage by virtue of being up front and not having to deal with the pack behind him. These are the first laps he's led all day, and despite a few looks by Kyle Busch to his inside, Mark has maintained his position lap after lap. The final caution of the race puts us well into the night, as a red flag is needed to clean up the track. Even still, NASCAR rules at the time stated that all races must end under green, even if that means making 3 attempts at a green-white checkered. The yellow comes back out and the race is extended to allow for what will hopefully be the final restart. Mark was actually the first guy to complete 500 miles here, but due to this rule, the official winner will actually have run 505 miles today, as 2 additional laps are needed to get things squared away. On lap 200, the green flag flies and Mark begins the race of his life. But where's Harvick in all of this? Well, that's him back there in 7th. He's got just 2 laps to move from there to here. Even with pack racing and the draft, it's a tall order, but he manages to do it with a daring move to the outside and a good bit of help from Mark's former teammate, Matt Kenseth, who pushes the 29 to the front into turn 3 on the second to last lap. Harvick has led just 2 laps today, and even those were due to pit stop cycles. He never ran up front for long. But as he weaves his way through the minefield of cars, one thing becomes apparent. He and Mark are obviously the 2 best cars left out there. Harvick's passes aren't just helping him get to the front, but giving him practice as well to pull off the last pass for the win if he can get there. The bottom line has been the ticket all throughout Speedweeks. Just about everyone has made their big moves down there. But Harvick has found out that coming off the corners, he can make some passes on the outside. The field takes the white, and Harvick and Matt make their move going down the backstretch. Harvick gets pinched to the outside not once, but twice on his march to the front, but he never lets off the gas. In turns 3 and 4, he's there on Mark's quarter panel, and Mark moves up the track to give him a shove. But he gets loose and loses ground. Harvick and Mark go door to door. Kyle's in position to push Mark and give him a boost to retake his position, but the young phenom goes through one of turn 4's bumps while keeping his foot to the floor. The car steps out from underneath him and collects Kenseth to his outside and everybody behind them. As the world around them disappears, consumed in a torrent of fire, sparks, and smoke, 2 men race towards destiny. One seeks to validate 3 decades of struggle, tragedy, and triumph with this win. If he could never win a title, then maybe right here, right now, he can at least add his name to the list of Daytona 500 winners and be remembered that way. And the other driver, after having been called upon to drive one of the most iconic rides in motorsports after one of the greatest of all time died in this very race just 6 years ago today, can reassure everyone around him that he deserves this ride. He has a long career ahead of him, but he can fast-track his name into the NASCAR history books right now with a last lap pass. The 2 race each other cleanly. Neither one ever touches the other as they both maneuver around the tri-oval. They never try to slam into or dump the other, a testament to their skill and their respect for one another. Tonight, they will let the horsepower they have under the hood and the air around them determine the outcome of this race. The rest is, as they say, a moment in history. Enjoy.
It's going to be a drag race all the way back to the start-finish line. No caution. They're side by side, right to the line.
Big crash. Here they come. Checkered flag. Harvick. Kevin Harvick wins the Daytona 500.
We got one car on his roof coming across the start-finish line.
Still wrecking. They're wrecking everywhere. Jeff Gordon's wrecked.
And they are still wrecking.
Have you ever?
Well, a couple of times.
I'm going to repeat what I heard a few years ago. No, I have never.
I got so excited I broke the damn mirror in half.